Today I'm here with the Lieutenant Governor Trevor Langer to ask some questions. So first off, how are you guys planning on to deal with the split in the executive branch?
Really, what's going to happen is that we've seen a lot of clash, which is to be expected. I mean, this is Boise State. It's a political simulation. We've got 500 kids here who don't really know each other. So any type of clash was absolutely going to be expected. But in the executive branch itself, what we've seen is that we have 3 delegates from both parties who are working together fabulously. I really couldn't ask for a better group of people to work with, and it's really been a ride. So we have our issues to work out so much with the legislative branch and the judicial branch, but the executive branch is strong and steady, and we're ready to work with the people in this Boise State simulation.
Cool. What's your progress with the budget?
All right, so right now the budget is underway. We're finalizing the talks, and it's going through the House of Representatives right now. They're making the final cuts. They're reallocating some money from certain areas that we had allocated previously, and it's really just going to be in its final stages as we're speaking now. It's underway.
So I heard the Senate did not approve the budget. So what are you doing to get the Senate's approval?
Actually, I was just in the Senate for a little while talking to them after we had our lunch break, and we've come to an agreement. They were just curious. They had questions, and so I was there. I was able to answer their questions, and they passed the original budget that the executive branch worked on last night. So that went back down to the House. The House is going to make some appropriations, and the Senate has been absolutely wonderful with their cooperation and working with us.
So one of the nationalist points during campaign was the EEE, the Energy, Economy, and Education. How do you plan on funding the Education First Association?
Okay, so the education bill has taken some cuts. As you may know, we had a $1.6 million deficit to work through last night with the budget, and so all the departments had to make some cuts. But what we can see is that because every one day is about 2 months roughly in the simulation, if we pass a couple pieces of legislation through Senate after the budget, we're going to be making about $200,000 estimated a day. When we get that type of revenue coming back, we can put that revenue towards allocating funds towards programs like education and towards the Department of Jobs and getting some economic factors to stimulate the economy further.
And how are you guys planning on funding the Alternative Energy Alliance?
The Alternative Energy Alliance has worked with us since day one. They've been on board for what our platform has standed for since Clayton and I began running, and that is that we are going to focus on an increase of alternate energy through a couple different ways. We're going to increase the amount of jobs that we get from like water alternative energy and some wind farms through the appropriation of different types of stimulus packages throughout different bills that are going through the floors. It's not going to be one major referendum, but it's going to be something that is a gradual change, an increase in alternate energy and an increase in jobs.
And for the last E, the funding of the economy, what do you guys plan for that?
Like I said earlier, if we have about this $200,000 that's pumping back, we can put it into things like education and to things like getting jobs. I really have believed since I've come here that the key to revitalizing the economy is through the creation of jobs. So that's going to be our main focus on revitalizing the economy.
Wait a minute. What are the questions?
The Supreme Court appoints.
How do you, what's the question?
Can you say? Tell us about the Supreme Court.
Okay. How are you guys planning on picking the Supreme Court appointments?
We had a meeting last night. We were mulling over our candidates for the Supreme Court while we were working over the budget, and we have a very solid list of young men who have shown their loyalty to not only Clayton and I, but to the rest of the elected officials. Some people who we have absolute faith in and who are very strong leaders, very strong speakers, who we know won't let us down. So we've decided our leaders, and they'll be released. The names will be released soon, I'm sure.
Do any candidates stand out in particular for the Supreme Court justices?
Like I said, we reviewed the applications. We had very strong just a very strong group of kids. If you're looking for names in particular, a friend of mine, his name is Vivek, was someone who had came in, who was given an unfortunate disadvantage actually in the application process. So he came in at about 11 o'clock last night and had a discussion with us. He just sat down and we had a cooperative discussion about why he thinks he should be appointed to the Supreme Court, and he was just very strong and confident, and it really had all the right answers to the things that we were looking for. Someone who's very charismatic, and I have a lot of faith in.
What kind of qualities and qualifications are you looking for in Supreme Court justices?
Something that we've told everyone who's come up to Clayton and I and asked if they could be in the consideration for a Supreme Court justice is the one thing that we're looking for is loyalty. We want people who we know we can count on. That way, when we go back to our cooperationist roots, we can have someone who we will cooperate with and who will be on our side when we're trying to get things at a cooperative terms with everyone involved in any dealings through the Supreme Court or even through the legislative branch.
How do you plan on dealing with all the suing that's been going around all the counties today?
Well, we hope that this matter will be resolved when the Department of Justice has a little bit more to do with their time rather than to make some lawsuits containing, I think, every one of the political candidates and some of the other departments. Really what I think it comes down to is that there's been a lack of things to do because of the budget issue. The budget hasn't been passed, so people have really been at a standstill. Once the budget's passed and things really get rolling, I think the lawsuits will die down, as they have already started to. Most of the lawsuits that were appropriated before lunch have already died off. It's not going to be a huge issue.
All right, shifting the conversation a little bit. How do you feel about the Cush Castle project?
Well, with the Sticky Icky Act, the resolution number 420 that's going through the Senate after the budget has been resolved, along with the Cush Castles, is going to generate a tremendous amount of revenue. We're going to increase taxes on this, on marijuana, and it's going to just yield so much reward for not only each individual county that is involved with the Cush Castles or with the Sticky Icky Act, but with the state as a whole. We're going to be generating tremendous amounts of revenue for a plan that's long overdue in my mind. The legalization of marijuana is something that has a very strong revenue backing and something that should no longer be ignored.
And so you said you're going to generate a huge amount of revenue. What are you going to do with that?
Our main focus, as Clayton and I have said throughout the majority of our campaign, and even to this point, is going to be on education. So first, we're going to appropriate some of these $200,000 estimated that's going to be coming in towards the education reform that we have been planning since day one.
Still being on the subject, that's Sam Mallory, am I correct?
Yes, Sam Mallory.
Okay, do you think he's only doing this to get more attention and possibly control the agricultural race with an iron fist?
Just with the Cush Castles, you're asking?
Yes.
Just with the Cush Castles? Okay, I would say no to that. I would say no as of what I've learned today. If it was yesterday, I might have agreed with you that Sam Mallory might have been a little bit crazy for Cush, but what we can see today is that when we had a department head meeting, I sat down with the heads of every department and we talked. We talked about the budget and we talked about what can be expected in the weeks to come. And something that was shocking to me was that Sam Mallory, who is in the Department of Tourism and Culture, wasn't there. He was busy dealing with other pieces of legislation, doing other good work that is in the best interest of everyone, not just focusing on Cush Castles. So I don't think he's going to be a one-trick pony with the Cush Castles. I think Sam Mallory has the absolute potential to surprise us all, and I don't think he's going to try and run a monopoly of the agriculture sector or anything along those lines.
Just to go off topic for a couple more minutes. Lately, in the recent past lunchtime, there's been a thing going around that Eisenhower County has been blaming Bradley County for insignificant revenue because they legalized prostitution. What is your feelings and opinions about that?
Something that has long been debated in the federal system is the legalization of prostitution. And while I have actually seen no details on who legalized what and where, I have heard a little bit of speculation around just from people talking about it. And what we can see is that the legalization of prostitution in some counties is an idea that is similar to that of the legalization of marijuana. It's just been a little misguided. What we can see is that they legalized it at a county level, and so the county was already suffering from some debt crises, and they were not in a very strong economic standing point because the budget hasn't been passed. So the legalization of prostitution was, I believe personally, a mistake on the county level. If they wanted that type of economic stimulus, they should have come to one of their party leaders or one of the elected officials. We could have worked with them to see what would be in the best minds of everyone involved with that kind of a suit. As for the rivalry between Bradley and Eisenhower, that's something that they'll work out. I have complete faith that they'll be professional in their dealings and no real conflict will be involved with it.
All right, now we've had some pact conflict lately too. We've heard that the oil pact has been having money taken from the Attorney General. Is this true, and what are your opinions about that?
Actually, to clarify, it wasn't the oil pack in general. What happened was that there was an accidental miscalculations of fund from the Department of Energy. Now, when Mr. Santos was running for Attorney General, he did not get in writing, he did not get a receipt on a bit of funding that he honestly had no idea was coming towards him. The Department of Energy was misguided in their appropriations of funds, and what happened was that the funds were returned, they were never spent, nothing was ever taken to anyone's personal accounts or into a campaign account. The money was absolutely immediately returned as soon as we figured out what the issue was, and there's really nothing more to say than that.
Speaking of the Department of Energy, our Department of Energy representative from Bradley County told the whole county today that he was getting sued for sending $1,500 to the Nationalist Party. Is this the money that you returned?
Yes.
And if he does plan on making a deal with you guys to send it, how are you going to divide the money out throughout the energy, or are you guys going to divide it out to more of the other plans as usual, like education and the Heritage Act?
Right. Okay, so what we can see is that the Department of Energy can't really give money to us. We are the government. The Department of Energy is the government. They would just be giving $1,500 back to themselves. So what we can see is that if there's going to be any planning done with any type of energy investment, it's going to have to come down to legislation. We're going to have to go through the Senate and the House of Representatives if there's going to be any plans like that. So as for the lawsuit, that's the same thing. It's been resolved. There's nothing there. The money was just misproperly allocated. It was confusion on everyone's part. It was a harmless foul. No one ever meant to do anything. There was no absolute grounds for a lawsuit, and it's already been resolved.
So do you think the Department of Energy knew that it was illegal for them to give you guys all their money at the time, that they did it accidentally?
I don't believe that they did, because I think that they were misguided. They saw PACs donating at the time, and we're 500 kids that didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into for the most part. So I don't think that they knew that they weren't supposed to give that type of money. My friend, who is another gubernatorial candidate who now is working with the Department of Energy, I talked to him earlier, and it was just a big miscalculation and confusion. Nothing was put in writing, and the money was promptly returned as soon as we figured out what the issue was.
All right, now back to Samuel Mallory and the Cush Castles. For tax reasons, have you guys been planning on like what you guys are going to be taxing for selling, taxing for growing, and have decided on like how much each county is going to be receiving from these agricultural places, and which type are they actually going to be growing?
Okay. I don't have the details as for the last part. I don't know which type they're actually going to be growing. I've just looked at the absolute legislative in the Sticky Icky Act and some details of the Cush Castles. What I can tell you is that there have been a lot of speculations as for taxes. We looked at Colorado outside the boy state world, the actual state of Colorado, and what they did with their marijuana. What they did is they put a 25% absolute tax on marijuana, meaning any of the 25% in growing and selling and consumption that was gained and garnered goes straight back to the states. Now, we can see that Kansas is going to be a more conservative state than Colorado, so we've actually heard numbers in between a 37 to 50% tax on marijuana. That is going to be absolutely huge and contributing to the amount of revenue that we're generating from the Sticky Icky Act and these Cush Castles. So the higher tax in this situation, although it might sound scary at start, is something that's going to be absolutely appropriate. The fact of the matter is that the Sticky Icky Act and these Cush Castles are going to help us fund education for a better future.
So because marijuana is not legal at this point, or I mean outside the simulation, there's a lot of crime involved and like people smoking it and stuff like that. Do you think the crime rates will go down, or do you think they'll just find some other drug to do that's illegal now?
If we look back to Colorado, as I mentioned previously, when Colorado legalized, they had a 13% crime drop in their most urban areas, in their most highly targeted areas where they need to focus on crime the most. So I absolutely believe that crime rates would drop as they have in the situation of, say, Colorado.
I heard that the House of Representatives aren't completely in agreement with the budget right now. Do you think any problems will arise? And if so, how long do you think it will take for the budget to pass through the House of Representatives?
Okay, so I went down to the House of Representatives myself, and I spoke to my good friend Christian, who's the Speaker of the House right now. Basically, what they needed to know was that the $312,000 that we had appropriated towards agriculture was the absolute minimum that it could have been at. See, the only issue was that they were taking away from the agriculture sector too much, and they just didn't know. It was just a confusional error because they hadn't talked to either myself or to Clayton or anyone from the Department of Agriculture. So once I spoke to the Speaker of the House and we got that issue resolved, they started working on a comprehensive plan towards passing the budget. And honestly, guys, I wouldn't be surprised if they're in there passing it right now.
We also heard that there was a bill going around the House and the Senate about more legislative power. Is that going to affect how the rest of Boise State's going to turn out between power of the people, or is it just going to be a totalitarianism act?
I don't think we're going to have any tyrannical kind of competition going on because of the fact that, yes, there was a bill announced. Yes, there was a bill that had been pondered on by some people. But really what this is going to come down to is the checks and balances. This is why we have the Judicial Center and why we have the judicial branch that works with us in situations like this. Really what the House and Senate proposed in this piece of legislation is ludicrous. They cannot take the two-thirds veto power from the governor, particularly when they appointed this bill before we even had a governor. They hadn't seen who would be in office. They hadn't seen what type of policy would be enacted. They jumped the gun and made an act that is absolutely too limiting and infringes on the American right of the checks and balances system. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think it'll be resolved peacefully, respectfully, and in a timely manner.
I heard that in the human resources they've teamed up with health and environment and some of the energy sectors, and they were trying to agree on a floating hospital. Mm-hmm. Is that going to affect the revenue for Boise State, or is it going to help us out more and keep more revenue?
Well, there's no official word on the floating hospital yet, but I know that the Department of Health and Environment and Human Services have been working together quite a bit, which is something great. Like, going back to the platform, cooperationism, I love to see two of my departments working together, and that's something that we talked about in the department meeting earlier today. As for the floating hospital, there's been no official word on it. We know that we will be building hospitals. Whether they're floating or not is just an idea that we've been playing around with for displacement issues. Can we have more land appropriated for industry or for farming and less and utilize the river for the health sector? It's just an idea that we're playing around with. We're going to look at the logistics of that later. There will be hospitals made, I can guarantee you that. As for other things with the Human Services and Health and Environment, I know that they're doing great work with each other on issues like child labor laws in the agriculture sector, as well as some other pieces of legislation that they have not announced to us yet. So really, I am just honored to say that I can work with these people who have been such good friends in cooperating with each other and trying to get this type of legislation on the floor and passed through the House and Senate.
Yesterday at the debates, a key point made was about minimum wage. Mm-hmm. What is our government stance right now on minimum wage? Are we planning on keeping it the same, increasing it, or even decreasing it?
Right. Well, what we've seen is that the economic problems we're facing really need to focus less on the wages that we're paying people and more about the amount of people that we can pay. If we pay attention back to, as you stated, the debates of yesterday, they talked about how 13% of Kansans live below the poverty line, and that's something unacceptable. Now, I agree that minimum wage should be an issue that is looked at in the future, but if we want to improve the economy, if we want to get less of that 13% out and more of that 8% unemployment rate to fall, we really need to focus on the creation of jobs before we look at wages. The amount of jobs will outweigh the amount of wage garnishment that we can get if we were to appropriate a different minimum wage, so I think we should focus on the creation of jobs before we do anything with the minimum wage.
We just have one more question for you, just about the social aspect of the state of Kansas. There was a debate topic about gay marriage. Has there been any bills that have been going through the Senate, or have you guys even bothered to talk about it? Because from some of us, it is very important because we've been hearing about it from all these other states.
Right.
We want to know what the government's key point is on going and maybe possibly making a bill about it, and explain a little bit about it as you go on.
Well, as of right now, there's been no released statements of anyone looking towards the gay marriage bill. What this means is that it's either that people are focusing on the budgetary issues, as I would agree that that should be our top priority right now. Until that's passed, there's really no funding to anyone, so we can't get any of other legislation passed. So as for that, there have been no official statements. I was the one that received the question about the gay marriage in the debate. So you all know that my stance is that we need to cooperate on equality for all. But as for any legislation, there hasn't been anything released yet. So that's all I can really say. Until someone proposes something that I would be more than willing to work and cooperate with them on, we haven't taken any stance on it as of today.
Another point made at the debate yesterday was social welfare. How is our government's stance right now on social welfare? Are we planning on
You're talking about the Social Security?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, something that I know that a lot of people were really frustrated with was that question. And that question comes down to the fact that Social Security is a federal issue and it's not a state issue. The state of Kansas can't do anything to change Social Security. The question, I believe, in the debate itself was about the overwhelming amount of people who are putting money in and not getting enough out, and that's purely because of the population trends and the population demographic. But when we come down to the brass tacks of it, the state can't do anything about Social Security because it's a federal issue.
Can the state do anything to do like a backup plan, plan B, so to speak, in case it does fall through?
Well, I think that the best defense would be prevention in this case. And the way that we can prevent this type of welfare system from needing to occur is through the creation of more jobs. If we can sustain the economy by creating jobs, then the need for a welfare system, while although still important, will be lesser so, because more people will be getting revenue from their jobs, and the economy will be further stimulated through the further creation of these jobs.
And our last question today is, how do you think our government's future looks like? Are we moving in the right track? And what problems could we see in the future?
I really have had such a great time here at Boise State because of the fact that from day one, when I initially started talking to Clayton about how our interests in governor aligned, we talked about cooperation. And cooperation has been something that I have seen so much of and has been such a huge factor in this Boise State experience for me. So to answer your question, Joel, the future of Boise State looks amazing. The future looks amazing because of the fact that I have seen so many young people come together over issues and cooperate in a professional manner. Yes, there's been argument, but that's to be expected. We're not going to please all 500 people, but if we can work together to tackle these issues, as I've already seen so far, the future's bright, you guys. It really is. I'm truly blessed to be a part of this program, and I would like to thank everyone involved.
Thank you so much for your time, Trevor.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.